The right to vote, it's something so many of us take for granted, but it only exists because of the hard work of people who dedicate their lives to obtain and protect that right. Hello, I am Vernon Abeda, the governor of the Pueblo of Isleta. It is my honor to present to you a short film about the man who made it possible for all Native Americans in New Mexico to vote. His name was Miguel Trujillo. Even though he was born in Isleta, Pueblo, I have asked other New Mexico Pueblo governors to join me in this presentation. That's because Miguel's fight is responsible for the sacred right to vote that continues to be enjoyed by every Native American in this state. Miguel Trujillo did not take no for an answer in his desire to vote in 1948. The result is history and deserves the broadest of recognition. Miguel Trujillo truly righted a wrong.
Guadzi Hopa, I am Governor Martin Coimi from the Pueblo of Laguna. It's my pleasure to present the life of Miguel Trujillo. In 1904, Miguel was born in the village of Isleta Pueblo to Juanito Jaramillo and Jose Trujillo. At a young age, Miguel's father passed away, leaving Juanita to raise two boys on her own. Miguel and his brothers soon became the providers, earning money herding goats. While attending school, Miguel was continuously being told by family and friends to drop out so that he could focus on working and helping the family. Knowing that an education was essential, Miguel resisted the pressure and continued with his studies. Miguel attended the Albuquerque Indian School, one of the oldest and largest off-reservation boarding schools in the United States. Here, Miguel first experienced the stripping of Native identity and assimilation into white American culture by indigenous students. Miguel later attended Haskell Institute in Lawrence, Kansas, now named Haskell Indian Nations University. It is the oldest federal school for American Indians. During his time at Haskell, Miguel was active in activities including the Haskell wrestling team and the cadet corps. It was here that Miguel met a fellow classmate, Rachanda Paisano, who was from Laguna Pueblo. They later married and had two children, Josephine and Michael. Upon completion of his studies at Haskell Institute, Miguel taught at the Bureau of Indian Affairs School in Laguna Pueblo. Miguel later enrolled at the University of New Mexico to pursue an undergraduate education, yet faced many obstacles. At that time, there were no scholarships available for indigenous students, and he was supporting his wife, their two children, and his elderly mother. Just before the onset of World War II, Miguel finally received his bachelor's degree. Like many other indigenous men, Miguel enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. You will hear much more about his service later. After the war ended, Miguel received an honorable discharge and returned home to his family in a teaching position at the Bureau of Indian Affairs Day School in Laguna Pueblo. With the help from the popular GI Bill, Miguel received his master's degree from UNM and joined the All-Indian Pueblo Council. He later worked toward a PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. Miguel found work as an educator and later as a social worker. He not only fought for indigenous civil rights, but also for immigrant workers and black Southerners living in the Jim Crow era. He retired in 1959 after 33 years of teaching with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Miguel's son Michael recalls his father always having a book in his hand and always reading, saying, he had a good intellect, good insight into people. Miguel believed in the education for his children, who both entered the field of medicine. Dr. Michael Trujillo eventually became the director of the Indian Health Service under President Bill Clinton. Michael said of his father, we got those positions because of his encouragement. He said, you can always do well, you can always do better.
Hello, I'm Governor Joey Sanchez from the Pueblo of Santa Ana. Being in the Marine Corps was a big part of Miguel Trujillo's life. It is my pleasure to present a look at the importance of Miguel's military service. When World War II broke out, Trujillo enlisted in the Marines, like so many other Indians. According to William C. Meadows' book, The Comanche Code Talkers of World War II, Native Americans volunteered for the armed forces at a rate of 2 men for every one drafted during World War II. Another historian, Gerald D. Nash, wrote in The American West Transformed, the impact of the Second World War that at least 25,000 American Indians served in the armed forces during World War II, and more than 550 of them were killed. Proudly a member of the United States Marines, Miguel ultimately became a staff sergeant and then served as a recruiter in Santa Fe. While he assisted in the enlistment of many Native Americans, it should be noted that he eventually recruited Navajo code talker Thomas Begay. After receiving an honorable discharge at the end of the war, Miguel returned to his family and his teaching post at Laguna, commuting to Albuquerque to earn his master's on the GI Bill. Pueblo people, as well as many other American Indians, had volunteered to serve in World War I, World War II, only to come home and not have the right to participate in American democracy. So it is when Miguel Trujillo, a veteran of World War II, in service with the Marine Corps, went to register to vote. But the register of Valencia County, Eloy Garley, told him that because he was an Indian living on a reservation, he could not register and could not vote. Though Pueblo Indians paid many of the same taxes as other citizens, they did not pay state income tax. And the New Mexico Constitution states that these Indians not taxed could not vote. So began Miguel's fight for the right to vote. Attempts by Indians to gain voting rights had great public support because the plaintiffs in both Arizona and New Mexico were veterans, representative of thousands of American Indians who served in World War II. In Trujillo's case, the presiding judge declared, "It is perhaps not entirely pertinent to the question here, but we know how those New Mexico Indians have responded to the needs of the country in a time of war in a patriotic, wholehearted way, both in furnishing manpower in the military forces and in the purchase of war bonds and patriotic contributions of that character. Why should they be deprived of their rights to vote now because they are favored by the federal government in exempting lands from taxation?" Miguel's daughter remembers it this way. She said, "I think during the war, seeing how many Native Americans were joining the service just gave him more gumption to go ahead and try to get something done. My father was the kind of individual who always looking for righting a wrong."
After learning to fight in World War II, Miguel Trujillo now found himself in the middle of a courtroom battle. Hi, I'm Governor Randall Vicente from the Pueblo of Acoma, and it is my pleasure to share with you some of his details of this highly consequential case. In 1948, State of New Mexico court case known as Trujillo versus Garley was a turning point for indigenous people. It totally redefined the state voting laws and rights. Miguel Trujillo, a tribal member of Salado Pueblo, returned to the U.S. from serving as a Marine in World War II and was denied his right to vote by Valencia County Registrar Eloy Garley. It was in accordance with the State of New Mexico Constitution law. On June 2nd, 1924, Congress passed the Indian Citizens Act stating all American Indians born within territorial limits of the United States are citizens. The Nationality Act of 1940 and the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, also known as the McCarran-Walter Act, eliminated any doubt of the citizenship status of Native Americans. Passage to the acts allowed for indigenous people to be given full U.S. rights and privileges at the federal level. However, many state constitutions continue to deny or prohibit indigenous people from voting for various reasons, including the following: not paying taxes, practicing tribal traditions, language, religion, and culture, and the sovereign relationship between the federal government and the American Indian tribes. New Mexico was not the only state in which lawmakers had enacted legislation designed to limit people's voting rights, as illustrated by the women's suffrage and African American suffrage movements. The 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution had all changed the criteria of who could vote, stating that everyone born or naturalized within the U.S. shall be a citizen and that the right to vote shall not be denied based on one's race or sex. However, indigenous people continue to be denied citizenship and full voting rights long after the passage of these amendments. As a result of being denied to register to vote, Plaintiff Miguel Trujillo sued defendant Eloy Garley on August 2, 1948. The case was heard by the Federal District Court in Santa Fe. Garley's attorneys declared that New Mexico's Constitution said that Indians who did not pay state taxes were not permitted to vote. Miguel countered by stating that though he does not pay state taxes as a result of residing on a Pueblo reservation, he does pay other forms of taxes such as gasoline, sales, and federal income taxes. It was a powerful argument made by this World War II veteran, Ori Phillips, one of the 3 judges on the panel, stated,
"The Constitution of New Mexico says Indians not taxed may not vote, although they possess every other qualification. We are unable to escape the conclusion that under the 14th and 15th Amendments, that constitutes a discrimination on the grounds of race. How you can escape the conclusion that makes the requirement franchise and does not make that requirement with respect to the member of any race is beyond me."
The court ruled in favor of Trujillo on August 11, 1948, and that verdict changed New Mexico's constitution by removing the provisions prohibiting indigenous people from practicing their right to vote. New Mexico became one of the states in the Southwest to address indigenous voting rights disputes, with more to follow. Yet challenges remain. Some states created more difficulties, such as ballots available only in English, difficult access locations of voting ballots and facilities requiring certain forms of identification, and SOTA. In 1965, Voting Rights Act helped address some of these issues, but others still remain today.
Hello, I'm former Governor Mark Mitchell of the Pueblo of Tesuque and current chairman of the All Pueblo Council of Governors. Now that you know a little bit more about Miguel Trujillo, it's important to talk about his legacy and his impacts to our nation. Today, with the civil rights struggle of the 1960s a part of history, it seems inconceivable that Indians would be denied the right to vote just because they lived on the reservation. Those of us who watched the civil rights struggle of the 60s on network television were always relieved that violence wasn't required to gain the right to vote in New Mexico. But perhaps that is why history seems largely to have forgotten Miguel Trujillo's contribution. Violence was not required, but a fight and a battle of wills did take place. For most Americans, Indians remain the backdrop to American history. They perceive Indian heroes as warriors of the past, like Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, and Geronimo. Trujillo directly confronted bias and prejudice that discouraged Indian participation to the larger system. Using the American legal system as his weapon, he fought to make democracy work for all citizens while proudly maintaining his Indian identity and integrity. Many historians cite 1948 as the year in which Indians finally won the right to vote. Court rulings in Arizona and New Mexico affirmed that right. The court found that New Mexico had discriminated against Indians by denying them the right to vote, even as they paid most state and federal taxes. The only exception was for private property taxes on the reservation. In honoring Miguel Trujillo, we must remember to recognize times in our lives that turn out to be events of enormous importance. It seems incredible that in 1948, Indians could not vote in New Mexico. Back then, we thought the political process belonged to someone else, but Miguel Trujillo didn't see it that way. It's hard to imagine the courage it took to sue the state of New Mexico in 1948, particularly for an Indian. The fact that Miguel Trujillo prevailed in this court case means that we have a chance today to prevail in the political process. Miguel Trujillo is the father of what political power we have now, and the greater political power we will achieve in the future. Since gaining the right to vote in 1948, Indian voting turnout in New Mexico has been sporadic and affected by setbacks and challenges. It is only within the past few decades that voting turnout has significantly changed. Due to the increasing political clout, the Pueblo people have organized and turned out to vote in record numbers. Pueblo Indians continue to credit the efforts of Miguel Trujillo for gaining that right to vote, a fundamental right of American democracy. His legacy urges us to become more involved in the political process, to rally to the ballot boxes and campaign trail. It is never too late to stand up, but now standing up is more important than ever. The political landscape is changing rapidly, and it affects our struggles to survive as a people. Native people of the Southwest have always been deeply aware of the factors that dictate their survival. From the rain and the sun to the shifting policies at the Department of the Interior or a change on the Supreme Court, it is only natural the native people of New Mexico be involved in the political forces shaping the landscape they occupy. The fact remains that if we participate in the political process, we can be rewarded. If we do not participate, we will continue to be punished. We cannot squander the legacy of Miguel Trujillo. We must use it and make it a better life for ourselves and our people.
I hope that you enjoyed hearing about Miguel Trujillo and learned something too. The importance of Pueblo political engagement during this day and age is paramount for the success of our communities moving forward. Thank you.